It also is National Medal of Honor Day here in the country. One of the highest medals, or the highest medal that can be bestowed upon someone. And we'll get to our Veterans Proclamation here shortly. First, we're going to start with our invocation. This is going to be put on by Mr. Pastor Andy Searles, and then Commissioner Herr will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pastor?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we gather today to serve our community, seeking wisdom, unity, and clarity in our decisions. May we lead with integrity, be guided by compassion and justice, always mindful of those we serve. Bless our leaders with discernment, our citizens with peace, and our county with prosperity. May our actions today sow the seeds of a brighter tomorrow. Amen.
Amen. It's because of our veterans and those that serve that we have the privilege of saying, I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Pastor. We sincerely appreciate it. Next, we're going to move on to our proclamations. This is a proclamation proclaiming Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveras, United States Air Force of Seminole County's March Veteran of the Month. This will be read by Commissioner Delary, and I would urge each and every one of you to silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As all the veterans' proclamations are all very special. And this one, I've known the Staff Sergeant for many years, so it's great that I'm able to present this not just to you, Staff Sergeant, but also to the community. Proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners. United States Air Force Sergeant Tommy Oliveira for his outstanding service to the United States in Seminole County. Whereas the brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force demonstrate a resolute spirit of unmatched selflessness, reminding us of the few things more Americans can giving of ourselves than making a difference in the lives of others. Whereas throughout our country's history, generations of servicemen members have answered the call to leaving their families and their jobs and putting their future and even their lives in line to valiantly defend our nation. Whereas many service members have sacrificed and ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in a continuous preservation of freedom and a promise of liberty. Whereas there are more than 30,000 living veterans in Seminole County who have served our nation in time of peace and war, though their service have kept Americans strong. And whereas Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira has listed in the United States Air Force on active duty on April 1986 and separated out of the Air Force on October 1994. He was an electronics warfare technician, completing multiple deployments with the 1st Special Operations Wing in support of Operation Just Cause, Operation Desert Shield, Operation Desert Storm, and with the 352nd Special Operations Wing in support of Operation Providing Comfort 1, 2, and 3, Operation Promise, and Operation Denied Flight. During his service, Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira received the John Levetto Award as top leader in his class. He's also received the recipient of the Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Achievement Medal, the Joint Merit Unit Award with 2 Oak Cleave clusters, Southwest Asian Service Award Medal with 3 Bronze Stars, among 13 other medals and ribbons. And whereas Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira moved to Seminole County in 1994 and has been a resident since. He began his work here in Seminole County as a senior team leader of the Office of Information Technology on September 2000, and is currently Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira has served as a board member of the past president of the Central Florida Board of Certified Public Managers, and is currently the vice chairman of the Regional Domestic Security Task Force 5, and is currently the chairman of the Orlando Urban Area Security Initiative. And whereas Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira has brought great credit and distinction upon himself, the United States of America, the United States Air Force, and Seminole County. Now, therefore, we proclaim that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira for his outstanding service to the United States Air Force and residents of Seminole County. Be it further proclaimed that this proclamation be presented to the Staff Sergeant Tommy Oliveira, with our sincere gratitude and recognition of Seminole County Veteran of the Month, adopted this 25th day, March 2025.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your service. Mr. Oliveira, if you join us up front, we'll get a picture and ask you to have a few words for us.
Right here on my count, 3, 2, 1.
Family? You've paid as big a sacrifice as he has.
Right here on my count, in 3, 2, 1. You'll be back.
That's a nice play.
I just want to, Chairman, Board, County Management, Senior Leadership, everyone in the audience, my staff, my lovely wife and son here. Just want to thank everybody for this great honor, and it is really an honor. Civil service is a very noble job, and I just want to thank everyone for this recognition. Thank you so much.
Honor is ours. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to go to our investment advisor report. It's going to be done remote. We have Mr. McIntyre queued up.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm always worried whenever this is remote, but I'll make this fairly quick, kind of cut to the chase. We're not making recommendations at this point. The market has rallied quite a bit, and been a lot of purchases have been made. But the on again, off again, I'm sorry, I can't see the slide at the moment, but the off again, on again tariffs have been disruptive to the market. And sorry, Jeremiah, I can't see that. There we go. Inflation concerns have shifted to recession worries. I think everybody's aware of that. Now, I don't know how valid that is, but some of the real-time measures are negative at this point in time, so there is some concern. It doesn't mean that it can't right itself very quickly, but right now it's a shaky market, both bonds and stocks, for what it's worth. Stocks are up today. I think volatility is something we're all going to have to get used to for at least the first half of this year. And that extreme uncertainty has affected consumer confidence and business confidence, business investment, spending, stock prices, everything at this point, because we don't have a handle on things, and the Fed doesn't have a handle on things. The Fed did meet this couple weeks now. They met in March. They didn't do anything. They did not cut rates. They didn't raise rates. Powell was, as he usually is, pretty even-handed in terms of his assessment of things. And there was a fresh dot plot, which is the outlook for interest rates among the Fed members, and that fresh dot plot continued to indicate 2 rate cuts, both of those in the second half of this year. Now, those rate cuts really are going to depend on a couple of things, and one of the things that it's going to depend on is inflation getting back in line. We did have what I would consider to be a solid, a fair enough CPI report. So core CPI actually fell to a 4-year low. Most people look through these CPI numbers despite the fact that this is cooling inflation. It's also February. And tariffs are going to go into place in March, and then we're going to have reciprocal tariffs that are likely to go into place in April. So a lot of this inflation we haven't seen yet, and the market understands that. The Fed understands that. One of the things that Powell did that I thought was interesting at the meeting was that he differentiated between what he called tariff inflation and regular inflation. And that really opens up the door for him to be able to potentially cut rates if the economy softens significantly, even though inflation may be headed higher, because he's made that differentiation. So we'll keep you on that. The next slide, please. As we usually do, we show you where rates have been and where they are now. The 2-year Treasury note got down to about 390 the other day. When I created this slide, it was down to 392. It's up a little bit now, but it's considerably lower than it's been over the course of the last several months, which means that the county, the clerk's offices made purchases at significantly higher levels than we currently are. The expectation is that yields are going to continue to fall throughout this year. So they've just come a long way in a short period of time. Next slide, please. So upcoming maturities, actually there are no maturities in April. There are a number of maturities at the end of May, but I figured I would address those the next time I'm in front of you guys. So we've got a $13 million Treasury security that's maturing in about 6 weeks. Other than that, there's just the cash that's on hand. Recent investments, I will tell you that if you tally up the 35 that was reinvested before yields dropped, which is nice, that was done following the last meeting. And then you look at the purchases that were made in January and December, they total about 330, so that's roughly a third of the portfolio. Almost all of those have been pushed out well beyond a year, in some cases 2 and 3 years, and the clerk's office has been able to lock in, roughly 420, 430, 435, so some pretty good levels. So right now this affords us the luxury of holding steady. A lot of investments have been done recently. There are not maturities that we have to address. The last 2 maturities were rolled over at favorable levels. So again, that makes it pretty easy in terms of what we're asking for here, which is basically a hold until I'm in front of you guys in a month.
Mr. Chairman?
Jeremiah, if we can go to one more slide.
Sure, go ahead.
The February yield on the portfolio was 448. And again, the 2-year got down to 390. The mix between fixed and floating, about 83% was fully invested as of the end of February. And as of the end of March, it's going to be about 82%. So it's a well-invested portfolio at this point in time. It's somewhat backloaded relative to what has been done in the past, and that's deliberate, with the expectation that yields are going to continue to fall. So is there any, I guess we have
Any
to ask for a
questions?
motion at this point.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Delory.
I'd like to make a motion to implement the recommendations of our financial advisor based on the report submitted today, and recommend the clerk implement said recommendations.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre, for appearing remotely today. We're glad we
Okay,
could
well, I appreciate it.
accommodate.
It's good to see you guys. We'll see you next month.
Very well. Be safe. All right, next we're going to move to our consent agenda items. These are items 3 through 21. If you are here and desire to speak on any of these items, items 3 through 21, please fill out a speaker's form in the lobby, bring it down and hand it to the clerk, Ms. Dominique, here down at the front. She'll get you queued and we'll call you up to speak on these items if you desire to do so. I will go to the county attorney, Ms. Kate Latour, for the rules of public engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Florida law provides that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on propositions before the Board of County Commissioners, except when the board is acting on emergency or ministerial matters or conducting a meeting exempt from the requirements of the Sunshine Law. Individuals shall be permitted 3 minutes each for public comment or 6 minutes when the individual is an official representative of a formal association or group. The chairman may modify the maximum time for public comment at his sole discretion when appropriate. Public comments on quasi-judicial or other public hearing items will occur during the board's consideration of those items this afternoon. Public comments on pending procurement matters or on non-agenda items shall not be permitted at this time. Members of the public desiring to make public comment must fill out a speaker form and present the form to staff. Forms are available in the lobby. Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Torrey. Madam County Manager's Office, do we have any updates, deletions, additions to the agenda?
Yes, sir. Item number 5, we are recommending be pulled and moved to the next board meeting.
Okay, item 5 to be pulled and rescheduled to the next board meeting.
That's all I have.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there any commissioner that desires to have any of the items pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, we will go to the public. Any members of the public here to speak on any of the agenda items?
No, sir.
We'll close public input and go to board action.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Constantine.
I will move the constitutional consent item number 3 and the county manager's consent items 4 through 21, except for 5.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, now we will move on to our regular agenda. We'll give folks here in the audience that may be departing us a moment to exit, so we make sure that we are able to focus on our next item. Next item is our regular agenda will be item number 22, the homelessness update, be presented by Trish Johnson, Deputy County Manager, which I think is now going to be possibly switched a little bit.
I'll still be presenting, but
Okay.
Carrie Longsworth will also be tag teaming with me this morning.
Great, as well as Chris Ham from
Yes, sir.
Rescue Outreach Mission.
Thank you, sir. And good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Our team is here to provide an overview of the funding history between Seminole County Government and Rescue Outreach Mission. Our agenda for this presentation, first, Carrie Longsworth will highlight some of the agencies that serve the homeless community here in our county, followed by some Seminole Action Board history. I will then provide a high-level summary of various federal, state, and local funding programs, followed by an overview of the county's funding history with ROM, and then Chris Ham, the Executive Director of ROM, and Christine Schaefer, the Director of Shelter Services, will join us to present at the conclusion of our slides. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Carrie Longsworth, our Division Manager of Community Assistance.
Good morning, Commissioners. Carrie Longsworth, Community Assistance Division Manager. I just want to touch a little bit about some of the agencies that are serving our homeless population. There's been a lot of talk lately about some overlap of services, collaboration among the nonprofits. And so this slide right here really represents agencies that are focused on the housing component of homelessness. Of course, there's other agencies that are providing support, mental health, food, different things like that, substance use, but this is really the housing piece. And this is kind of how we can break homelessness up when we look at services that are provided for housing. If you can look at the far left, you're going to see that the largest overlap is going to be our prevention services. That's really keeping people in their homes, paying one-time rental assistance, utilities to keep them housed so they do not enter the homeless system. We also have our rapid rehousing program, which there are several agencies providing that service. That is actually going to be services mostly targeting families with minor children. It does short to medium-term rental assistance, usually about 6 to 12 months, along with case management, in the hopes that they can quickly be housed and maintain self-sufficiency. If you look at the two smaller boxes, the top one is our permanent supportive housing. They're the fewest agencies provide those services. The county community services offices provide services to about 70 chronically homeless individuals, and Aspire Health Partners provide services to about 25 homeless individuals. These are individuals that have been on the streets for a year or longer. They usually have severe mental health and/or substance use issues, and this is our hardest population that we do work with. This is ongoing support with rental and case management assistance. We also have another group that provides transitional housing. This actually is not traditionally funded by HUD any longer, but there are some agencies and some populations that really benefit from transitional housing. So Empower works with our youth that are aging out of foster care, ages 18 to 24. They provide them with some housing services along with case management, mental health services, and Pathways to Care is actually a respite program that provides assistance for individuals coming out of the hospital that need medical respite if they don't have anywhere else to go. Our street outreach programs actually do a wide range of things, but their goal is not necessarily housing directly, but to get people ready to be housed. So they're engaging with our homeless that are in the camps. Our Aspire Health Partners, as well as our SALT Mobile outreach, actually has individuals that go out into the camps to try to get people ready to be housed, get their documents, get them on the registry list. SALT Mobile Outreach also has mobile showers that goes out. They provide things such as clean socks that are needed, food, and other items they can distribute. And then the Christian Sharing Center has our drop-in center, the Oasis, where individuals can come, they can get showers, they can wash their clothes, charge their phone, they can receive mail there, as well as case management services. And then obviously our last category is our shelters. We do have 4 shelters in Seminole County. They all have a different population that they serve. Our shelter that serves men, women, and children is the Rescue Outreach Mission with the largest bed count. We also have Boys Town, which does youth ages 12 to 17. We have Recovery House, which has some beds available for men who have substance use issues, and our Safe House of Seminole, which is our domestic violence shelter. Seminole County Community Services Department also provides bridge housing and hotels for families with minor children when there's no space available at the Rescue Outreach Mission because there are limited rooms there. Also, we're going to touch a little bit on the Seminole Action Board. Again, there's been a lot of talk lately about homeless plans, what's the county's response to homelessness, what has happened, task force that have met. There has not been an official task force previously that's met for a while since the Seminole Action Board. The Seminole Action Board was kind of born out of the Leadership Seminoles Envision Conference, and Seminole County actually funded Leadership Seminole to provide a working group, a task force really made up of business leaders, community leaders. There were some nonprofits, the school board, the colleges, the sheriff's office, and some of the government agencies to really tackle homelessness as it was becoming a larger issue in Seminole County. The board officially started meeting in June of 2016 and continued to meet through November of 2020. The chairs of the board were John Hillenmeyer and Wendy Brandon, and they met about once a month. They also had a consultant that was brought along to assist this board and all the nonprofits kind of working together in a more coordinated fashion. Philip Mangano, who was the president of the American Roundtable to Abolish Homelessness. They did have a strategy during the first year that they were put together. They wanted to house 120 families and 50 individuals. The homeless providers, both the nonprofits and the community services office together, ended up assisting 142 families and 117 individuals for a total of more than 500 people housed that first year. Additionally, Worley Park, with Wendover Housing, an 82-unit development in Sanford that was specifically housing homelessness, was brought because of this. It was built, it opened in May of 2020. The county worked closely to get individuals housed into Worley Park. And when ARPA funding came around, the county allocated $250,000 to the nonprofit that was working with Wendover, Step Up on Second, to provide case management services. The Seminole Action Board did report in their first year that they were able to leverage more than $2 million in both housing and services through things like Worley Park, as well as housing vouchers through the Homeless Services Network, working with the nonprofits.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we review the funding timeline, I'd like to quickly highlight some key programs that support Rescue Outreach Mission and many of our community not-for-profits. I know this board is very familiar with these programs, but it can look like acronym soup to members of the public, so I'll quickly highlight them. Community Development Block Grants are federal dollars provided annually to entitlement cities and counties for various activities related to property acquisition and rehabilitation. Emergency Solution Grants are also federal dollars provided annually for shelter operations and essential services related to homelessness. You are, of course, familiar with our community service agreements, the county's annual grant program for essential and supportive services provided to not-for-profits. These funds originate from the county's general fund. And, of course, we all remember CARES and American Rescue Plan Act funds provided by the federal government directly related to financial hardship experienced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, or SHIP funds, are a one-time state-funded grant that supports various activities related to home and property acquisition. The following timeline is a high-level overview of the county's funding relationship with Rescue Outreach Mission since 2004. While there are nearly 30 agreements that span the last 20 years, I will highlight just a few of these. In 2013, the county entered into a contract with ROM pursuant to a CDBG developer agreement, which grants the county a mortgage on 2 ROM properties, the men's and women's shelters. This agreement committed $1.1 million in CDBG funds to renovate the men's shelter and construct the women's shelter. These properties have active restricted use covenants with a term of June 2034. I have received a few questions about what would happen if ROM determined it no longer wished to operate these properties as a shelter with active restricted use covenants attached. If that were to occur, the county could foreclose on its mortgage interest on the properties. It's important to note the county is not under any obligation to continue to operate these properties as a shelter, but the county could convey the properties to another not-for-profit to continue to operate them as a shelter, or the restricted use covenants could be modified so that a not-for-profit could operate differently in those properties but still provide low to moderate income support to various individuals. In September 2019, the county committed emergency funding totaling $120,000 general fund dollars to support ROM's payroll. At the time, restricted use covenants were placed on 3 vacant properties owned by ROM. This is in addition to the 2 active restricted use covenants on the aforementioned shelter locations. These 3 restricted use covenants have since expired. Seminole County purchased 2105 Hartwell Avenue in 2013, and later that year conveyed the property to Rescue Outreach Mission. The property was restricted to low to moderate income tenants for a 30-year term. In October 2020, the county purchased the property back from Rescue Outreach Mission for $157,000 using SHIP funds. Following a $184,000 renovation of the property using home and CDBG funds, the county has since conveyed the property to Resurrection Community Housing Development. As you know, the county entered into various ARPA agreements with ROM. I will highlight just a few of these. The ARPA funds for Rescue Outreach Mission total $2,850,000. All funds were fully expended by September 2024. An amendment was executed in January 2023. I mention this amendment simply because it includes the addition of 3 restricted use covenants for the 3 vacant properties I mentioned earlier. The maturity date for this agreement is June 2026. Therefore, at this point, all 5 of the ROM properties have restricted use covenants attached. As you recall, a mutual termination agreement for ARPA funds was executed by the board in November 2023, and a revised funding agreement was later approved. This slide highlights funds awarded to ROM by the county broken into 2 timeframes, 2004 to 2018 and 2019 to present. As you can see, the county's relationship with Rescue Outreach Mission became more involved in 2019. This is just another overview of the funds that have been awarded to ROM, the various categories over the last 20 years. I have received some questions related to the county's funding process for these various programs that I mentioned earlier and then on this slide. I'd like to ask Carrie back just for a moment to highlight how we fund particularly ESG, CSA, and CDBG programs. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Commissioners. Carrie Longsworth again for the record. We actually have a competitive process for our federal dollars that come into the county. Seminole County is an entitlement community from HUD, and so we receive the Community Development Block Grant and the Emergency Solutions Grant funds on an annual basis. We do put out a notice of funding availability to our nonprofit partners. They are able to apply. There's a review committee that ranks the applications and scores them. We make funding recommendations based on the funding we've received and the applications that have been submitted. And then ultimately, we do bring those decisions to the Board of County Commissioners to be able to approve in our annual action plan process every year in August. Something important to note that we have looked at with our CSAs, obviously, is the board that is obviously board general revenue funding. There is an application process as well. We do look at the needs assessment as being the driving force of the top needs that are identified in the community, and that's the priority of agencies that are receiving funding. With our federal dollars that are coming into the county does have the option to run those dollars internally on programs with CDBG, working on parks, working with the cities for infrastructure projects such as sidewalks and lighting. For our ESG programs, we also have the option to run those on rapid rehousing, which we do keep some internally, and also our prevention services. So it is this board's prerogative to keep the funds in-house or put them out to the nonprofits.
Thank you, Carrie. And Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes our portion of the presentation. If you'd like, we can address questions now or introduce Chris Ham and Christine Schaefer.
Sure. Any questions for this portion of the presentation? I do have one. The sheriff has been involved with ROM and has provided some services as well as personnel in the past. Have we quantified the value of that in any way, shape, or form?
We have not quantified that. I did contact the Sheriff's Office yesterday to understand their continued involvement, and while they do have involvement on the board and a committee, they no longer have staff involvement. I know they did have someone who was very involved with the shelter for a period of time. We can certainly follow up with them to get that information if you like.
Great, thank you very much. All right, any further questions? Seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Constantine.
Well, that, the question then I would have, based upon what the chairman just asked, is, you know, the sheriff gives away through captured dollars and assets, charity money. Do we know how much or if he has ever given to ROM?
I do know that.
Good, thank you.
We're not receiving funding through that mechanism from the sheriff's office. Historically, the engagement has been with two key personnel, one who serves on the board, and that's Chief Spriggs, and she has served on the Finance Committee, most importantly, and has been instrumental in helping to get the audits done so that fundraising could take place. We were in a position in 2020 when I came in that you couldn't actually raise funds based on the lack of audits. That is all in the rearview mirror at this point. The other one was an officer who became the operations person at the shelter and held it together during COVID. So from my perspective, that was in order to facilitate keeping the doors open during that pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Ms. Longsworth, very much. We may have some questions come up later. And now, Mr. Chris Ham from Rescue Outreach Mission. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Ham.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Chris Ham. I'm the Executive Director of Rescue Outreach Mission. With me is Christine Schaefer, who is our Director of Shelter Services. Before we start, I want to share really the importance of this photo up here for you. See, every time we find a home for one of our guests, we have a key that gets placed on a wall as a reminder. Last year, almost 250 keys were placed on the wall for the families that are finding permanent homes. In just a moment, you'll see how impressive that really is. I think we all agree that no one should be sleeping outside, no one should be in their cars or tents, and none of us want our great county to look like DC or California with large encampments. As a reminder, as you're aware, but for the public, rescue outreach missions really like a hospital emergency room. Guests, as we call them, come to us in crisis, experiencing trauma, as they have nowhere else to go. Unlike other shelters in our area that remove guests during the day, we remain a solace 24 hours a day. We also operate in partnership with emergency management as an extreme weather shelter during extreme cold, extreme heat, and I don't want to say the H word that's coming upon us, but we open those shelter doors expanded capacity so our schools and other shelters don't have to be open unless they really must do. But as funding remains tight, we're starting to think about alternatives. What happens if there's no RUM? What if we went to a different model without our 24-hour service of care? Well, over the course of the past year, that would mean nearly 800 individuals who would be sleeping and spending time in our libraries and our malls, our public parks, and on private property. I don't think any of us really want that. So there's a couple options that are on the table. We continue to fund Rescue Outreach Mission for about $38 a night per person. I would never suggest this, but in the Orlando Sentinel this morning, City of Orlando decided to spend millions on 2 buses for people to sleep in a 6x6 square foot area at about $68 per night, but still, or $78 per night, still removing people every morning to the streets. Our jail space is operating at about $106 per night. We can pay for hotel rooms at a cost of upwards of $150 per night. We can build tiny homes or entry-level apartments that are about $75,000 to upwards of $125,000 per unit. I believe strongly that RUM is by far the most cost-effective way to address this issue, and of that $38, we're anticipating 65 to 80% to be paid by non-government sources. You know, I'm constantly amazed at where we have come in just a few short years. I'm going to turn this over to Christine Schaefer, who's our Director of Shelter Services, to share a little bit more.
Good morning. So it's no secret that the number of people experiencing homelessness is on the rise. 20% of our guests are seniors, seeing expenses outpace the cost of living increases from Social Security. Young families are going to debt as rising costs are not being matched by increased wages. Children account for 21% of our population at RUM. For men, women, and children living on the edge, life is not easy. One unexpected expense, like car trouble, a job loss, medical bills, can cause someone to lose their housing. Match that with the cost of moving in, which is often more than $5,000 just to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, and you're in for the perfect storm. Based on the numbers I've just provided, you can see that our guests do not paint the picture of the stereotypical homeless person. Less than 8% of our guests are identifying as drug and alcohol users, and an even smaller percentage of guests with severe mental health issues. In the last few years, we've taken steps to greatly increase the number of people we serve and help. You'll notice that since 2021, we've nearly doubled the number of people we serve. To accomplish this, we've worked hard on case management to quickly determine case plan goals and work towards housing. We've become more efficient and developed better techniques when serving our guests. What I'm most proud of, however, is that we've more than tripled the number of people who are able to obtain permanent housing through our program. We've done this by developing a network of organizations who exchange information, resources, and give more options for our clients in and out of shelter. By utilizing our community partners and resources that are already available in the county, we can house guests faster, reduce their length of homelessness, and allow us to increase the number of guests served at the shelter. This also helps us prevent duplication of services within the county. I'll turn it back over to Chris to discuss funding.
Just like our operations, we've worked hard over the last 3 years to increase non-government funding in some pretty significant ways. In many ways, when I became the executive director, we were a startup. My donor database was a piece of paper with 4 names on it. The good news is we're just 3 months into our fiscal year. We start January 1st. We're almost halfway to our 2025 fundraising goal. Just last week, it was announced privately that we were approved for an anonymous grant that's going to provide almost $300,000 to us this year alone. Most of our large fundraising does come towards the end of our fiscal year, which we end in December. So we're grateful to be this far ahead at this point in time. Though we still have a projected fundraising gap between our expenses and our income. Now, we hope this is going to be overcome with additional private fundraising, but as we all know, costs are increasing. And we're all a bit unsure about the economic conditions later this year. Right now, you'll see we do have a bit of a reserve, a little bit more than 6 months. Now, that's intentional on our part. We don't know what the future is going to bring. We don't have a long track record to show our cash flow with our increased demand for services. We do believe that we're going to be able to use about $120,000 of our reserves for operating expenses so we can remain in that 180 days of emergency reserves. We hesitate to go lower because we don't want to come to you in desperation for a quick fix later on. That's essential for cash flow, as our income is highly seasonal. And to prepare if the worst happens and if non-government funding is harder to come by because of a downturn in the economy. That's why we're coming with an ask. Above the $200,000 that you've already allocated in CSA funding, for this year we'd like up to an additional $280,000 in funding to support our services. Now, our hope and our goal is that we can exceed our income projections to not utilize all of that funding, but it's most likely that we'll need some this year. For the next year, we'll budget an additional increase in fundraising efforts for non-governmental funding. In addition to the $200,000 of CSA, we're going to ask for an additional allocation. Now, I'm hopeful we'll be able to continue to decrease government funding. I'm also hopeful that other affected governments in Seminole County will come to the table, if you will, to help us lower the county's support, and we can use your help in that push. Commissioners, I hope our community understands the impact Rescue Outreach Mission has here on Seminole County the way that each of you have. We're working diligently to tell the story. We're leaving no stone unturned in this effort, and your support is essential to our county's future. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Ham? I do have one or two. If you can go back a slide or two, if you don't mind. Up, come forward one. So what's your total overhead?
About 1.4 million.
Okay, and you've got 800,000 in unrestricted reserves?
Mm-hmm.
And you're, if I understood what you said, January, you already are halfway to your 2025 fundraising.
Today, we are. Our fiscal year is January 1st through December 31st.
Correct.
Right, we're almost at 400,000.
Okay.
Due to this large grant that I can't tell you who gave it to us yet.
No,
We're hoping to
understood.
enhance it in a couple weeks.
No,
yeah.
I understood. Okay. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Commissioner Herr.
So if you stay on this slide for a minute, I think what we're attempting to do here is oblige a couple of things, maybe 5 things. One is to make sure that the county stays ahead of the new legislation with regard to folks sleeping on private property. And that's very important. This is probably the least expensive way we can do it in the current iterations of homelessness being addressed in our county. But the second is, and this is exceptionally important, is that our board has heard loud and clear that we don't want to be surprised with an ask, and I think Commissioner Delary said it very well in the last presentation that Chris did. We don't want any last-minute surprises, which is what happened in 19, but it was before I got here, so I can't really speak to that. But so the notion of maintaining 180 days of reserve in an organization that has had really no track record at understanding the cash flow in the organization, given the ramp up, and if you take that slide back to the ramp up in revenue raised, if you look at this ramp up, you can see that we don't have more than a year's worth of any understanding of cash flow. So the idea now, if you go to that next slide again, is that we would, and I'll use your term, Chairman, sit on the reserve to make sure that we're not coming back. And if you take it to the ask slide, we're not asking for the money. We're asking for up to, with the idea that we may come back with no ask at all in either year. We just don't know. So the most important thing that I think this organization does is keep the doors open and keep them open at the current service levels, which is critically important to getting folks into the shelter and moving them out of the shelter, which we're doing rather effectively now. And the last comment that I would make is that I'd be remiss if I didn't, and this is in order of importance, shout out to Christine, who is there every day getting folks into that shelter and through her team getting folks out of that shelter into stabilized housing. Our recidivism rate is pretty low. That's due to the work that her team does. And then Chris is out there, so shout out to Chris, focused on fundraising with his team that does that.
Anything else? Okay, I think this is something that's appropriate for our budget work sessions that are upcoming. For me, I would like a lot of data. I would like to see how many revisits, meaning people that are cycling back through. I would like to see where, the best we can, the majority of the impact is coming from throughout the county. If it's a particular city or multiple cities or unincorporated Seminole County, would be important to me. And then you mentioned the drug abuse and alcohol abuse. I'd like to have a clean understanding of how we're dealing with that, separating that population or getting them additional help to some of those that are actually more focused on that would be helpful for me when we get to that point. Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you. Chris, no one questions the job and the passion that you and your staff bring to this, and I'm very thankful that you exist, that you're there. But let me just ask a few questions. The $800,000 that you have in fundraising, okay. So we have already given half of what you've gotten so far. And of the $800,000, if we gave another $200,000, so we'd be giving half of your fundraising activity. So the real fundraising would be potentially $400,000. Am I correct?
No, it would be more than that.
Okay. That's why I'm trying to figure it out.
Because then we would ramp up, we would continue to raise at 800, and that would take us over to the 1.2, 1.4, yeah.
But just so we get a clear perspective, the $400,000 that you've raised so far, almost, more than half has come from the county.
As of today, but that will change quickly in the next couple of
I
months.
hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
The second question I had is in looking at the numbers and being interested in those, you called them dignity buses, I believe, that the city of Orlando approved yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that you said they were millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
From what I read, it was $285,000 per bus. Let me just finish. And they bought 2 buses. So where is the additional money that you're suggesting come from?
So for that is the operating costs of $78 per night. They've allocated, according to the Orlando Sentinel, about $3 million to allocate about $500,000 per bus for 20 individuals per year. And they come in around 7 to 9 p.m. and then exit that next morning.
Yes, I do understand the process. I was just surprised with the individual cost there, because the $285,000 is a fixed cost.
Correct.
Obviously, there's going to have to be repair and maintenance. what other services do you know? And I'm interested because it's clear that you have looked into this, and I'm thankful you have. So what other costs are involved in that bus? Are they feeding them on the bus, or how does that work?
No, they're going to be parked downtown at the Christian Service Center or other locations. So there's the fixed cost of an employee who's there, or 2 employees, 1 in each bus. There's the gas costs, the electricity costs, and other costs associated with that.
And I would suspect it's case management, et cetera.
Yeah. And that would then be done the next day at the service center or other places in downtown Orlando.
It's just good, thank you, but it's just good that you are monitoring that, because, we're all looking at potential successes and opportunities. So thank you very much for that.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to tag on, the math is the straight math. It's 500,000 divided by 365 divided by 20 heads in the bed. That's how we got to the $68.
$78?
78.
Whatever the number was.
Yeah.
So we want to keep a good monitor on it, because if there's a less expensive alternative, we need to be exploring it for sure.
Or something that could work in conjunction
Exactly.
with. And that's what I was looking at, the mobility opportunity of, not everybody can come to Sanford and come to ROM. There are, other opportunities throughout the county. And if that could be in conjunction with, I'm not looking at either or, I'm looking at
Agreed.
in conjunction with.
Commissioner Glory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, thank you for the presentation. I also want to thank Tricia and Carrie for their presentation as well. Very well presented. As you know, if you can go back through the timeline that our staff presented, this board is very well invested in rescue outreach and the homeless. It's not something that we've just started getting into. It's been discussed not just at the board level, but the community level, and well as through Leadership Seminole. I know we have a couple of members, maybe a member here from Leadership Seminole, and they've been very involved with this as well. So I would like, as you said, Mr. Chairman, take this up during the budget process, the issues that we're going to be having with the budget coming up this year when it comes to potential shortfalls, as we discussed in our retreat. It's imperative that we, as well as the community, understand the total view and lens of the budget as we move into next year. I would like to look at your entire budget instead of just having one sheet. If you can present that to our staff, I'd greatly appreciate it. And can you also present with the budget, comparison from, the last year or so we can actually see what the trends are looking like. And I also know that in talking to our county manager, I'm sorry he's not here today, he's under the weather. I did get a text message from him that he's ill. That's why Tricia Johnson's here, a deputy. And I know that our county manager is meeting with you on monthly, I've been told by him in my briefings. And so if there's any shortfalls, please keep our county manager involved, as well as I know that our Commissioner Herr, will keep us involved as well, so that there are no surprises. And the worst thing we want is anybody to be told at the last minute that we need X amount of dollars, within, the next week or so. Because we did have that happen to us.
That won't happen again, Commissioner.
You weren't here, Chris, neither was anyone on your board. But those types of surprises are not acceptable. And with you meeting with the county manager, as well as our county commissioner on the board, I know that won't happen. So I feel pretty contented from that perspective. But you're correct, Mr. Chairman. I think this is something that we should be looking at in great depth and looking at it from a total budget perspective. Thank you.
And I don't disagree. I mean, my concern was a couple months ago that you all were here. We had already given you $230,000, and then within a month or two, I guess 2.5 months, to be fair, 3 months, we were being told if we didn't get $600,000, ROM was going to have to close. Now here I look at, you're telling me we have $800,000 in reserves, and fundraising is going fairly good. So I think those numbers are going to be very, very important for us to see during the budget session. For me, it's about doing what we need to do for the homeless in this community, but it's also about working with other entities to help get to that and clear that hurdle, and combining efforts in any way, shape, or form we can. I know Commissioner Herr sat on that action group that was before mentioned up until 2020, which is now defunct. So I'm sure she has some awareness of that and how that all functioned as well. But, bringing those charities together to do what's best for the most, I think is really where the answer is to all this. Instead of, we got multiple charities out there raising multiple monies for similar or complementary services, I think it would behoove us to have that discussion in depth with all those folks and see who may be best served to do a certain portion or collaborate on a portion of it or do multiple fundraisers or joint fundraisers. There's all kinds of ways to do this, and ultimately to address, the state statutes for the homeless and all that. We've adopted an ordinance, and for me, especially for the general fund dollars, those are taxpayers' dollars. So there may have to be a referendum go on the ballot to see what our citizens desire to do, because it is their money. And likewise, it's tax dollars coming out of Tallahassee as well as coming out of DC. Just for the belief that those dollars are not tax dollars, they are. So for me, it's a lot of thought process, but I think starting with the budget hearings and really digging down to the finances will be helpful. I am a little taken back. We're now in 2025. I was asked by the then chairman of this board, Commissioner Carey, in 2019 to go to ROM and help try to get things back up and going, and it's been a very slow process. And I know Commissioner Herr has been there for a couple years. There's been audits attempted, quasi-performed back in 2020, 2021. Ms. Lisa Spriggs from the Sheriff's Office was involved at that time. But here we are, 6 years later, and definitely better. But the county's put $3.8 or $2.8 million of ARPA money and other monies into this, and we're not a whole lot further ahead, other than we've got a nicer facility, we've got some organization going on. That's a lot of money over a short period of time to not be further ahead than what we are. That's my concern. Commissioner Herr.
In all honesty, I don't even know what to say to that. So let me offer just some very from-the-heart commentary. It's not been 5 or 6 years. It was 2019 when the disaster was identified. There was a pandemic going on. Everyone was focused on the pandemic, not necessarily focused on Rescue Outreach Mission. ARPA money was earmarked from the federal government to the states, then to the counties for homelessness. And this is the only emergency homeless shelter in town. So the notion that ARPA money should not have been given, and I realize you didn't say that, but we take credit for the ARPA money given as though that money was Seminole County taxpayer money. It was federal taxpayer money. And had we not used it for this, we would have had a bigger mess. There were, and I don't know what happened with Rescue Outreach Mission before 2020, which is when I was asked to be on that board by, at the time, Chairman Constantine. But we were finding receipts in the ceiling tiles, folks. And that didn't happen under my watch, that didn't happen under Chris's watch, and it didn't happen under the reconstituted board's watch. During the pandemic, we lost the treasurer of our board due to COVID. It's a sudden death. We had to recover from that. We also housed people multiple times in conditions that were monitored by our EOC, and we were deemed the only place they could go. So as COVID wrapped up, we then secured a new executive director. The audit process has been long and arduous, and I will tell you, no one worked harder on it than Lisa Spriggs, and she deserves all the credit in the world. But our audits are clean, so I don't want anyone to walk away from this at this point thinking that the disappointment is related to a bad audit. The audit was clean, so was last year's, and we are already on track for next year. So we've now turned this around in my time on the board, which has been less than 5 years, and are in a stable funding position and coming back to you. And I want you to move to that last slide, Chris, for me, please. And I just want to point out, I do appreciate, I think all this should be discussed in budget workshop. Chris was asked by our team to come back for a mid-year budget ask. That is why he was here 3 months ago, 2 months ago, whenever it was, and we were asked to bring it back again. And we gave you an update with the fundraising. It is going well. I don't know that we will need it. We are just letting you know that to be discussed. But that first 280 is fiscal year 2024-25 budget, not next year's budget. Although we can still discuss it in the workshop, that is the ask here, is that if you want us to keep a reserve in place to make sure that there's no last minute, and as you say, Chairman, regularly, everything in government takes way too long. It takes us too long to respond. So if we want to debate whether or not 6 months is the right number, should it be a different number, that's probably a worthy conversation. It takes us at least 3 months to get anything through this board. And so if it goes south fast, that's the thought process behind more than 90 days, just so you know. Okay. I think it's been an amazing progression. My husband and I have been donors to Rescue Outreach Mission for probably 25 years. He was the first to find them in the county, and it's in the best shape it's ever been.
Okay. Any further comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Ham. Sincerely appreciate it. Anybody here from the public wish to comment on this item?
No, sir.
Very good. Our next item up is item 23, reduction of lien request. This will be presented by Alexis Valley, Code Enforcement Officer, Office
Good
Clerk.
morning. Good morning. For the record, Alexis Valley, Clerk to the Code Enforcement Office. I'm presenting item number 23, which is a request for a total waiver of lien. This code enforcement violation is for trash and debris. The request to reduce the lien is from a collective $507,995.15 to $0. The current property owner brought the violation into compliance by removing the trash and debris from the property. The property was originally cited in March of 2012 for a violation of trash and debris. On October 25th, 2012, the Code Enforcement Board issued a findings of fact requiring compliance no later than November 15th, 2012. There was a lien hearing held on January 24th, 2013, and the board issued an order imposing a fine of $18,000, which will continue to accrue at $250 per day until brought into compliance. The property was brought into compliance on June 6, 2018, making the fine total $507,500. This table illustrates a financial summary of the case. The daily fines accrued is represented here as that $507,500. Total administrative costs, $495.15. The total lien amount is there. The 2024 assessed value is right in the middle, so you can compare that to the lien amount. In accordance with the administrative code, as the deputy county manager determined that the request did not fail any of the guidelines established by the administrative code, the deputy county manager reviewed the request by evaluating the amount of lien as compared to the value of the property. The amount of lien, which totals $507,995.15, far exceeds the assessed value of the property, which is $21,805. The actions taken or not taken by the property owners in attempting to abate the code violation, the code enforcement officer confirmed that the trash and debris were removed from the property on June 6, 2018, while the property was in violation from 2012 to June 2018. The applicant states that she was not aware of the violation until 2024, well after the property was brought into compliance. And lastly, the amount of staff time expended to bring the property in compliance, a collective 11.75 hours of staff time were expended on the code enforcement case. The request for total waiver, the applicant requests that the board make an exception to its established guidelines and entirely waive the total amount secured of the lien for the following reasons. 1, financial hardship. The amount of the lien far exceeds the amount of the applicant's gross income. The applicant provided supporting documentation relative to her income and reports ongoing medical costs obligations. Medical hardship. The applicant states that she has 2 permanent disabilities which limit her ability to perform both perform day-to-day functions at home and to work extra hours at her employment. The applicant requested action. The applicant requests that the board consider and make a final determination on the applicant's request for a total waiver of the lien to $0, and should the lien amount be reduced, authorize the chairman to execute a satisfaction of lien upon payment of the approved reduced amount, if any. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Constantine?
Just to be clear, the previous owner was cited back in 2012. The final judgment was a lien of $18,000 in 2013. When is the current owner, when did they buy the property?
So the respondent of this case still owns the property.
So it's the same person?
It's the same person.
And they brought it into compliance in 2018?
The lien was from 2012 to 2018. Basically, the previous clerk never submitted the affidavit of compliance to official records to be recorded. So then in the year 2024, I went ahead and did that and sent the respondent a letter in the mail letting her know the total amount of the lien, which is then why she requested the total waiver.
Thank you.
And just for the record, she is here if you have any additional questions. She's in the audience.
Does the applicant wish to make any statement to the board?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, please come forward.
Yes, sir. Good
Yes,
morning.
ma'am. Your name and address for the record.
My name is Vernette Cole. My address is 2306 North Beardall Avenue, Sanford, 32771.
Go ahead.
Well, as Alexa said, I never received a letter saying that, I had this lien on my property or anything like that. I always keep the property clean of debris except for just say when someone did live in the house and if I had to go in and throw everything out to the curb, because I do know I have that twice a year pickup service in my taxes. I put everything to the road, so I don't know if at that point in time did code enforcement go out there and see it then before it was picked up by the waste management. But I keep the yard cut. I don't have trees falling down or anything around it, and so it blindsided me when I got this letter from her stating that I owed all this money. And the yard is on a monthly schedule of getting cut. So any debris that would have been in the yard from falling from the trees that's around the property, that would have been picked up as well. So it just blindsided me, like, what happened? Because I wasn't getting any correspondence telling me I had done anything wrong. So, I know I definitely can't afford the amount that the letter is saying.
Sure.
As if I can afford that, I wouldn't be in that community. I'm sorry for that. But it's
Understood.
like,
So the question I have is, we heard the presentation that you weren't alerted until 2024 of how this had all manifested, but the original dated back to 2012. Do you recall any interaction back in 2012 with code enforcement or a violation being posted or notification at all?
no, sir. Honestly, I did not. I didn't know anything whatsoever. And I'm not standing here trying to tell you a lie about anything. And my mailing address has always, well, not since I own the property, but as of 2021, I always lived around the corner from the property. So, and my mail comes to my address. So why didn't I get any mail, certified? Because just like when I received her letter, I responded to it right away. So it's like, I'm there. I don't know if they sent mail to that actual address, which should have never been on file for an address for me, because I never had a key, to go into it, so I don't know what happened.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So my question is for staff. On the original violation, I caught the part about the previous clerk didn't file the proper paperwork
Correct.
in 2018, and you did it in 2024. But back in 2012, 2013, I think what I'm hearing from the applicant and the owner is she had no knowledge at all any of this was going on, even back to 2012. Do we have anything that supports otherwise?
So in the beginning, when the case was originally cited, we did use the property appraiser for citing for the mailing address. So it was the 2306 Bairdall Avenue. Originally, that first meeting, it was posted, but after that original findings of fact was issued, there was certified mail received, signed, which in past conversations, we determined it was the daughter of the respondent that signed for the green cards.
Okay.
So all notification from that first findings of fact was signed.
Okay, was there ever a hearing?
The findings of fact, that would be that original first meeting.
Okay. And the magistrate oversaw?
This was the code enforcement board at the time.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions or inquiries, staff or the applicant? This is Commissioner Herr's district. Commissioner Herr?
Yes, I move that we reduce the lien to the administrative expenses only, which is $495.15.
Second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just one thing, and I'm in support of the motion, but I do believe in discussions with Christian that, again, we talk about this all the time, but I'm going to repeat it again, that we have to do something with the administrative costs. There's no way that 12 years or 13 years of going back and forth, 11 and a half or 11.75 hours, which does not include the time to get there and the time to come back. And all the paperwork that was sent is $495. There's just no way that I can ever imagine that. But I support this motion today based upon what we have, how we calculate it.
And I don't disagree. I mean, I've asked that question numerous times. I think we all have. And I've been told statutorily we're limited on a certain amount we can charge for admin fees on an hourly or whatever. County attorney may address that again if you would.
Yes, I just wanted to let the board know that we are limited in certain, by case law and attorney general opinions, to only charging certain things to administrative costs. However, my office is going to work with the county manager's office as we continue to go through this entire code enforcement process. There are ways that we could be more efficient in capturing some of these administrative costs, so please be reassured that we are looking at this, and we do hear your concerns.
Great. And I had given a model, I think, to the county manager that included gasoline, the car costs, everything for the code enforcement officer, the time they roll and get there and go back and visit and all that. So those were all the questions I had for 5 years almost, so, okay.
And since we can't, I'm sorry, but I just want to say, and since we can't go back, it seemed that every single time they went there, they said it was 15 minutes. There was no it was 15 minutes.
Right.
So think about that when you're talking about 11.75 hours, how many times they went out there.
Great. I want to make sure there's nobody here from the public to speak on this matter.
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close public comment. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Thank you, folks, for being here today. Next item is item number 24, the fiscal year 24-25 grant and project carry forward budget amendment resolution. Mr. Tim Jex, Management and Budget Director, will present this item.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Timothy Jex with the Office of Management and Budget. Item number 24 is our annual grant and project carry forward BAR. This item was advertised in the Orlando Sentinel on March 20th. This is a budget amendment that will carry forward available balances of approved projects from last fiscal year 24 and reappropriate them in the current fiscal year 25. There are backup reports for this item, including a one-page summary, as well as a list of every project being carried forward, starting on page 739 of your agenda. The FY24 final budget included a total of 896 projects that fall under the categories shown here. Of that, 291 projects were completed, and 605 are being carried forward. Of the closed projects, $15.1 million is being returned to fund reserves. This BAR is balanced. On the revenue side, we have $548,126,662. Of that, $90.7 million is dedicated grant funding, and $457 million is assigned fund balances, which are revenues collected in a prior year and assigned to board-approved projects and are not part of our available reserve. On the expenditure side, you see our $90.7 million in grant carry forward, which includes $23 million in community services grants, $12.6 million in water utility grants, including our septic to sewer program, $21 million in public works grants, including our Midway Drainage Project, and $15 million in projects under the American Rescue Plan Act. Moving to the left, you see carrying forward $88 million in bond funding, which was issued for the core phase of our 5 Points Development Project. These remaining funds are primarily associated with a renovation of the Criminal Justice Center. Next, we have $181 million carried forward for 143 ongoing active projects in our sales tax program. Then we have our water, utility, and solid waste capital programs, where we're carrying forward $96 million across 130 projects. In the fire department, we're carrying forward $42 million related to new fire stations, station renovations, and fleet replacements. Then we have $24.5 million in projects from other restricted funds, including our building fund, transportation trust, and E911 funds. And finally, we're carrying forward $9.4 million in general funded projects, primarily associated with our Seminole County Sheriff's Office and our Facilities Department. That concludes my presentation. Staff's here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, anybody here from the public desire to speak on this item?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, move to approve the request.
A motion?
Second.
A second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Sincerely appreciate it. All right, anything else for the good of the order before we take our midday recess? Seeing none, we'll stay in recess until 1:30 p.m. Thank you all very much.